Your players sit around the table, dice in hand, ready to roll, and they're all looking right at you. What do? Most dungeon masters make the same mistakes, but you won't. We'll have you DMing the starter set adventure, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, like a pro the very first time. Plus, if you want to have your players begging to come back for more, you'll want to hear the tips at the end of this video. Welcome, Dungeon Masters! Running your first game can be really intimidating. But this guide is going to help you navigate Chapter 1 of Dragons of Stormwreck Isle with confidence. Now, this adventure is designed to introduce both new DMs and new players to Dungeons & Dragons in an easy and engaging way. It doesn't involve any super difficult mechanics or any epic long battles. Let's break it down step by step. Hey, I just want to let you know that this video is for DMs only. If you intend to be a player in this game, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, you need to shut the video off right now. There are major spoilers in here. This is for Dungeon Masters only. Okay, now that your players are gone, let's go over a few things. Before you run this game, I suggest you skim through the entire adventure, then go back and read Chapter 1 a little more closely. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to memorize anything. I'm talking about just getting the gist of where the story's headed and then focusing a little more on depth on Chapter 1 like we're doing in this video. Oh, hey, if you're new here and we're just first meeting, I'm Kristen and this is Kristen's Epic Adventures. If you're interested in all things tabletop role-playing, you're going to want to make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Now, you're going to notice when you open this book, on page 5, you start to see a map already, and I'll put some close-ups in so you know what I'm talking about. And throughout, there's some really great artwork and some more maps. Now, the maps in this book are also for Dungeon Master's eyes only. In the adventure books in D&D, the maps always may have secret things that are only for the Dungeon Masters, not for the players. So you either want to look online for a player-friendly version or make your own map or encourage the players to draw their own map, or you can even play this whole adventure with the players just imagining everything in their mind. They don't necessarily need to have a map. As you start to read through the adventure, you're going to notice these blue text boxes here. Now, these boxes are text boxes that you can literally read word for word right to your players if you'd like. You can ad-lib some of it, you can pick and choose what you want out of it, but you can literally read it word for word if you'd like. This is some information that it's okay to give the players as they enter certain areas of the adventure. All the information that's not in the blue box is also for Dungeon Masters only, and you want to read through that stuff, and that's more information that you're going to provide the players as you see fit. You don't want to dump all that information on them at once. Let them discover it, let them explore, and find out some of that information, and you're going to feed them the information that's not in the blue boxes little by little as they go through the game. One tip I'd like to add about adding some of your own words in is try to actually hit all the senses. The blue box may tell your players what they're seeing in front of them, but what are they smelling? What are they hearing? What does the environment feel like right now? At the very beginning of this adventure, your players arrive at Stormwreck Isle on a ship. Don't forget to add some sensory things, like maybe the distant cry of seagulls, or the smell of the salt air and the rocking of the ship. These things all add to a more immersive experience for everyone. Now, next, I encourage you, after you've read through the adventure and then reread Chapter 1, to really go through these character sheets. You're going to want to go through them with the players, but I also suggest you yourself as a DM look over them very closely first. Now, if you've never played Dungeons & Dragons before, and this is your first time, which I assume for a lot of you it is since you've picked up the starter set, let me just go over some of the things on this, and I'll insert some close-ups here so you know what I'm talking about. Down this left-hand side here is where your players are going to have their main ability scores. They don't often roll directly off these numbers, but these numbers help generate the numbers in this skills box and this savings throw box, and that's where they're going to look to make most of their rolls. You also want to make sure they know where to find their hit points. I don't have my glasses on. And where to find their armor class. This is really important when they're fighting things. The weapons that they have for fighting are going to be down here in this attacks section of this sheet. They're also going to have some special abilities located in this section. And another important part is their speed up here as well. Now, any of your players that pick the character sheets that are also able to cast spells, they're going to find a list of spells on the back and their spell slots, which we were going to go over a little more in a little bit. When you begin this adventure, a lot of your players may be really hesitant to do any of the role playing, and that's understandable, but you can help them along a little bit by simply asking them questions. Ask them to think about how their character might react in certain situations, or even asking them, what does it look like when your character smashes that kobold with their sword? One thing I want to encourage you to do is use simple voices for the characters. Do not feel that you need to be a voice actor and come up with a different voice for every single NPC in this game. I suggest even just picking one main NPC that interacts with the characters a lot, and you don't even have to try to give them an accent or anything. Maybe just try to have them speak in a different tone of voice, and it'll really help the immersion a lot as well. This slight shift in tone or mannerisms can make a character feel distinct and different from the rest. I also suggest you react to the players. If your players do something unexpected, just go with it. This game is all about having fun, so get used to saying yes and. Try to build on the players' ideas instead of shutting them down. The fun at the table is going to start to feel really limited if you're constantly telling the players, nope, you can't do that. Nope, you can't do that either. Have an open mind. Let them try it and just see what happens. Now, this ultimately means that your players might decide to do something that's not mentioned in the adventure book, which is completely okay. Just remember, if they're trying to do something that they could possibly fail at, you want to have them make some type of skill check. Just look through that list of skills, pick one that seems most appropriate, and have them make that skill check. You can very easily set the difficulty for these yourself. Just remember, something that sounds fairly easy can be a DC 10. Something that seems moderate in difficulty can be a DC 15. And something that seems really hard could be right up there of a DC 20. Let them also get creative and help each other out, different ways that they might be able to gain advantage on this roll. Now, as you look through this book and start playing for the first time, you're going to notice right away at the beginning of the adventure, there's an opportunity for combat right away against some zombies that come shambling out of the water towards the players. Now, they have an option here. They can stay and fight, or they can turn to run. Don't worry, if they decide to run, these zombies are going to come back later. But if they decide to fight, look at that, we're already in our first combat of the adventure. It's okay, stay calm, you've got this. All you have to do is have everyone roll for initiative, write down somewhere what everybody got for their initiative roll. So your players are all going to roll a d20 and add the number that's in that initiative box on their sheet. You're going to make one roll for initiative for the zombies. Your players have rolled for initiative, but how do you get initiative for the zombie? Well, all the initiative is your dexterity modifier. All the creatures that the players are going to fight are in the back of the adventure book in alphabetical order, and you'll notice that their dex modifier is a -2. They're pretty bad at that. So you're going to roll a d20 and subtract 2 to get their initiative number. Now you'll be able to see, based on the number, who's going in what order with your group of zombies put in the appropriate numerical order. All right, let's go. Let's start combat. Sorry, I shouldn't get ahead of myself, but I love some good combat. Let's slow down for a second and go over all the choices that characters are going to have in chapter 1 here. First off, they have to decide, are they going to fight these zombies or are they going to run? Then they're going to arrive at Dragon's Rest. This is a place where they can do a lot of exploration and role-playing as they meet the NPCs that live here. A few of these NPCs are going to give them the opportunity to venture even further on the island and either go visit the cave or go visit the shipwreck. This is how chapter 2 or chapter 3 get tied in. As your players journey to one of these locations, you're going to have the opportunity to give them an encounter while they're traveling. Now, once they complete either chapter 2 or chapter 3, the caves or the shipwreck, they're going to advance to level 2. That's essentially everything that's going to go on in chapter 1. Fight zombies, meet NPCs, get next quest, pick one of the quests to go on, have some more combat while they travel there. Okay, now I want to go back and give you some advice about the zombies and go over how to read the zombie stat block. Again, it's on the back cover of the book and with some really cool artwork. What you're going to notice, and I will put in some close-ups of this, is you have the zombie's armor class and the zombie's hit points, just like your players have an armor class and hit points. Now, one of the questions I get so often is, why does it have some dice mentioned in parentheses after the hit points? There is a way to randomly generate the hit points, and then there is an average hit points. They are telling you here that they used 3 8-sided dice and then added 9, and the average of that roll would be a 22. You are more than welcome, if you'd like, to roll 3 8-sided dice and add 9 and come up with different hit points for each zombie, but you can also just use the average of 22 hit points. This is what I do for most of my monsters that I run, is just go with the average. You also have here listed the zombie's speed, so you know how fast they can move, and you'll notice it's pretty slow compared to all the characters. Just under that, you'll see that they have all the same stats that your players have: strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So they have a score and a modifier next to it in parentheses for each of those, just like your players have down the left-hand side of their character sheet. Under that, you're going to find any additional information you need to know about these zombies. You'll see that they have +0 to wisdom saving throws. Now, if you have to calculate any other saving throws, you're just going to use the modifier of the type of saving throw that's up here. A strength saving throw, they would have a modifier of +1. A dex saving throw would be -2. This is just telling you that their wisdom saving throw is different than what's in their stats. Their wisdom is only a 6, which would be a -2, but in the instance of a saving throw, their wisdom is actually going to be a +0. So when it comes to saving throws, they're a little bit better than the other ones. So your players are not going to be able to poison these zombies. I mean, they're undead. They can't be poisoned. It also lets you know that the zombies have dark vision out to 60 feet, and their passive perception score, should you need it, is 8. They understand the languages they used to know when they were not undead, when they were alive, but they can't speak at all. In fact, all zombies really do is kind of moan and groan and shuffle, right? If we keep going down this stat block, here you see the zombies' special abilities. They have something called Undead Fortitude, and this is going to be really important when you run the zombies fighting against your players. It states that if the damage reduces the zombie to 0 hit points, which in normal circumstances would have mean that they died, the players actually defeated that zombie. That's normally what happens when you hit 0 hit points for a monster. But in this case, the zombie is going to make a Constitution saving throw, okay, with a DC, which is a difficulty class, of 5 plus the damage it took. So if we back up here for a second, first it says make a Constitution saving throw. And you can see from the stat block, their Constitution modifier is +3. So to make this Constitution saving throw for the zombie, you're going to roll the 20-sided die, and whatever you get, you're going to add 3 to it. Now the number they need to equal or beat is going to be 5 plus the amount of damage they took. So if the cleric does some damage to a zombie and they do 6 damage, you add 5, gives you 11. That Constitution saving throw needs to be 11 or higher. If the zombie doesn't make it, then yep, they're going to reduce their hit points to 0 and die. If they roll 11 or higher and they make that Constitution save, they're just going to drop to 1 hit point. So no matter how much damage they would have taken, they're just going to go down to 1. Now a creature that still has 1 hit point can still keep moving towards the enemy and can still keep attacking them. This is really important because at first your players are not going to realize that zombies can do this. Then down in the action section here, you're going to see the types of attacks that the zombie can make. They have a slam attack. Now, these zombies aren't carrying any weapons. What they're basically doing is slamming their bodies up against the players trying to hurt them. So it tells you that that's a melee weapon. It's not ranged, obviously. And it says +3 to hit. That means you're going to roll a d20, add 3 to the result, and the player needs to compare that to their armor class. If it equals or is higher than their armor class, then your zombie has attacked them successfully and has hit. If it's under their armor class, it's a miss. It didn't hit at all. The 5-foot reach tells you that the person literally needs to be right next to them for them to do this. They can only target 1 creature at a time to attack, and then it tells you that it does 4 bludgeoning damage if it connects. But you see, there's also another section here in parentheses, 1d6 + 1. That's the same as the average, how the average was obtained by like up here under the hit points. So you're welcome to have the zombie roll a d6 and add 1, or just take the average of, it does 2 bludgeoning damage to your cleric. You can use either method, and honestly, I use those averages most of the time. So let me know in the comments down below if you have any more questions about these creature stat blocks. So here's some advice for running the zombie combat against the players. Zombies are slow, but they're relentless. Have them maybe clustered together and moving as a shambling mass, and this can create some tension. Describe some of the horror from these zombies. Maybe one of them has their jaw loosely hanging off, and they all kind of groan and wheeze as they shuffle towards the players. Make sure you utilize this undead fortitude that the zombies have, but I would say at the same time, don't overdo it. This ability can actually keep the zombies up longer than expected, and you don't want your players for their very first combat ever to start to get frustrated. Balance the difficulty for new players. Most dungeon masters are going to keep the information about the monsters behind their screen, or at least out of the sight of the players, so feel free, if you can sense that the players are starting to get frustrated because they're having some trouble dropping these zombies, to make adjustments to their hit points or stop using the undead fortitude as the combat wraps up. We're going for maximum fun here over sticking adherently to the rules. Another tip is to encourage teamwork with your players. Suggest they make some tactical moves like helping each other out. Maybe focusing their fire all on 1 zombie at a time. You know, if 3 zombies are all still up with 1 hit point each, they all still have their full movement and their full attack. Whereas if only 1 zombie is left, there's only 1 to contend with. Help them start to think strategically. You may find with new players too, you might have to remind them of some of the abilities they have that might be specifically efficient against zombies. Now, as a bonus tip, when you're running D&D, if one of your players decides to take the dodge action, which basically means the next time someone attacks them, they have disadvantage at it because they're already prepared to get out of the way, but don't metagame and use that as an excuse for your monster not to attack them. If you repeatedly do that over and over again, players are just going to honestly stop using dodge, or use it knowing that this is going to make the DM not attack me. Remember, your monster wouldn't know that the character intends to dodge. Just because you're going to have disadvantage on that attack, consider how smart or how stupid your monster actually is and go for it. It's for the sake of the story. They might have an amazing description of how they're going to dodge that next attack that's going to make for a great role-playing opportunity. Now, I know a subject that comes up a lot for brand new players and playing the first few times is, should we have a map with some miniatures on it, or should we just play out all this combat in our heads? And honestly, you could do it either way. I almost suggest, at least for chapter 1, maybe, that you do all of your combat in your mind and see how that goes, and then get back together and discuss with the group if they would like to do future combats on a map with miniatures. So here's the big difference. Theater of the mind relies solely on verbal descriptions and your imagination. It's really great for fast-paced encounters, and it encourages a lot of creativity at the table. It also requires no setup. It can be a little more difficult, though, tracking positioning of where everybody is on the battlefield. Now, maps in something miniature to represent the characters can help a lot with visualizing the combat, especially in tactical fights. It is really good for complex battles, but also people who really enjoy strategy. Now, this doesn't also mean that you have to go out and spend a bunch of money on miniatures. You could use anything small that represents the characters and the monsters on the battlefield. You could use coins, you can use any small little trinkets, or you could actually have miniatures. And your maps can be anything from battle mats that are out there, to graph paper, to one of the players or you drawing up a map. Or here's a bonus tip. Take your average wrapping paper, flip it over, and there's usually some 1-inch squares on the back there that you could use down on the table as your battle map and draw right on it. Now, there's a dozen or so NPCs at Dragon's Rest that the characters can interact with, but there's really just 3 main ones that you really need to focus on. Runara, Tarak, and Varnoth. Again, you don't have to come up with different voices or accents for each of these NPCs, but if they just spoke in a different manner or a different tone of voice, that'll help the player's immersion a lot to know who they're talking to. Okay, so at this point, your players have probably fought the zombies, whether it's on the beach or at Dragon's Rest, talked to the NPCs at Dragon's Rest and kind of explored around a little bit, and a couple of those major NPCs have given them the other quests of going to the caves or going to the shipwreck. You want to pay attention to how much time you have left in your game session. You may have decided to stop after a certain number of hours or stop at a certain time of day, but one thing I want to recommend is that you stop your game on a cliffhanger. This is what's going to make your players excited to come back and play again the next time. Remember we talked about having those encounters that we can use as we travel to either the caves or the shipwreck? There are 3 of these travel encounters available in the adventure book, and they're kind of recommended for different levels. So I don't suggest you do the owlbear one in your first session. It's kind of meant for after the players have leveled up a little bit. So you can probably choose between either the hot springs or the cold. Hot-cold. You could either choose between the hot springs or the kobold renegades. I suggest the kobold renegades because the hot springs one is a little more difficult for level 1 and is probably more appropriate for level 2. The adventure book has instructions on how to actually scale those encounters up if your party has already leveled up. I suggest you do the kobold renegades if your players are still level 1, do the hot springs havoc once they get to level 2, and then save the owlbear encounter for once they're already up to level 3. Now, depending on how hurt your players get in this zombie combat, since it's their first time fighting anything in D&D, you might want to have them actually at least take a short rest, or if not, take a long rest at Dragon's Rest before they say that they're going to travel to the caves or travel to the shipwreck and you bring on this travel encounter. This is going to allow them to heal up a little bit. Now, on a short rest, they could roll their hit die and get some hit points back, and the wizard would also get a spell slot back on a short rest. Or they could decide to spend the night, in a sense, and take a full long rest to reset all their hit points to full and get all their spell slots back. A word of caution, though, to letting your players rest too much. Sometimes the next combat is a little more fun if they're already down on their luck a little bit. A lot of times players are going to constantly want to rest after a combat so that they can go into the next combat fully prepared. But some of the most fun combats can happen when they're not allowed to do that. Maybe it forces them to get a little more creative with their combat tactics. I really hope you're finding this helpful in running chapter 1 of this adventure. Make sure you go ahead and click the like button. It helps more people find us. And you're going to want to subscribe so that you don't miss any upcoming videos. On this channel, we go over all things tabletop role-playing games. So if you're looking for rules breakdowns, tips, tricks, unboxings, and reviews, this is a place for you. I also want to talk about something really important. For those bonus tips on how to get your players wanting to come back for more, let's go over how to end your session on a cliffhanger. If your session has come to a good stopping point or your game time has run out for the day, you want to try to end the gaming session on a dramatic moment. Let me show you what I mean by this. I've actually jotted down a few ideas. Perhaps your gaming session is ending on a battle wrapping up. As the final enemy falls, you can let the players know that they hear an eerie roar echoing across the island and hear Runara's voice on the wind. It is starting, she says. And then that's where we'll end for today. See how that leaves the players hanging with a little, like, a teaser bit of information where they're like, hey, I want to know what's going to happen next. Well, I guess we'll figure it out when we play next time. Here's another one. Let the players know upon reaching the entrance of the cave, they hear strange whispers echoing from within. Something or someone must be waiting inside. And then end your game session. How about, right before the session ends, you tell them something like, the shipwreck looms ahead, the broken hull groaning in the wind, but as you step closer, a cold breeze carries the sound of scratching from within. Here's a few more. Just as you enter the dark mouth of the cave, your torches flicker, and then one by one, they all go out. A weathered journal found in the shipwreck crumbles in your hands, but one phrase remains legible. Beware the guardian below. Or how about, as you step onto the beach near the shipwreck, the tide shifts unnaturally fast, revealing something buried in the sand, a skeletal hand reaching out. Don't those sound like amazing ways to end your gaming session for the day? I know I'd want to come back for more. You can come up with something of your own, but you really just want to foreshadow a new threat that's going to be happening in the next gaming session. Remember, running a game is about having fun, not being perfect. It's okay to get some rules wrong and fix them for next time. You can also stop and look it up if the group wants to. It might be a good time to take a break and look up a few rules. Remember, your players are not going to know if you forget some of the details or make a few mistakes. You're the one with access to the adventure book. Just keep the energy high, roll with the choices, and enjoy the story together. You've got this. Likes and subscribes are great free ways to support the channel, but if you find that you can monetarily support it, I've got a link down below for a Buy Me a Coffee. Now you're going to want to watch one of the videos on the next screen. Go ahead and click on that video, and I'll see you there. Now go forth and lead your players into adventure.